Good morning, everyone. My name is Joan Trin Pham, and this is my first ever video recording that I've ever done. I have decided to tackle a question that I get really frequently in my work as a hand analyst, which is, can you tell when I'm going to die by looking at my hand? Because in old palmistry, this was a thing. People would come to palmists often with the query of, tell me about my future. What's in my future? So it comes that, along with the imagery of, the crystal ball and the gypsies and being able to predict somebody's life, one of the long-standing myths in the ethos still is, can you tell when somebody's going to die by looking at their hand? I get this question pretty frequently, sometimes in the street, more public events that I do. And then most recently, I'm collaborating presently with an amazing Vancouver-based photographer named Tallulah. Now, I've been a big fan of her work for years, since she started taking pictures in the Vancouver burlesque community. And her most current project, or one of her main projects, is a project called the World People Project, which I find is completely fascinating. I will leave a link below so you can learn more about her work, but Tallulah basically takes a really in-depth approach to get to know the people that are in her community. And she captures them by taking pictures of them, but also spending time to learn more about them, learn more about their story, and immerse yourselves in their world for a brief amount of time. And I've had the great privilege of being able to be one of the people that she's interviewed. One of the questions she asked me was, she said, will you tell me the story again about the hand reader, your mother, and that prediction of her death when she escaped Vietnam? Because I have personal history with that. So, big question. Can I tell when somebody's dying by looking at the lines in their hand, their lifeline? Absolutely not. In the form of hand reading that I do, I read hands to help people create their own future by understanding how their thinking affects their behavior, which then affects their reality. So, if I read people's hands, I help them better appreciate with clarity what kind of thinking is already going on in their hand, and what are their superpowers, their skills, their natural ways of being, and then also their challenges that they will embark upon with much more clarity, so that they can navigate and increase the mindfulness of which they think, therefore creating a reality through choices that better reflects the highest possibilities for themselves. That's a snapshot of that question and the response to the answer. My personal story is a fascinating one, because I realized that a palm reader actually told my mom that she was going to die when she was 35. So there's backstory to this. What actually happened is that, I'm a first-generation Vietnamese Canadian. My parents escaped from Vietnam as boat people, and they made separate journeys. My mom must have escaped in about, I believe, 1977. But the story goes, according to family lore, is that my eldest aunt became the matriarch of the family because my grandmother died when my mother was very young. So the original plan was just for my Uncle Kim and one of my other uncles, Peter, to escape. Because, as we all know, escaping by boat for the Vietnamese was an extremely dangerous and perilous journey. So the thought was that the brothers would escape first, because they were boys. It was safer for them. And then they'd link back to the family once they were gone. So my eldest aunt, my Aunt Mun, in all of her wisdom, the story goes according to my mom, took everyone to the Catholic Church to pray, light candles. And then in the same breath, she walked them across the street to the town soothsayer, fortune teller kind of person. And my mom recalls that this palm reader, fortune teller, soothsayer, wise person in the village, read her palms and said a couple of things that profoundly influenced her life. One, he said that it was necessary for her to actually escape with the brothers, because she had fortune markers in her hands that would make the escape successful. And if the brothers did not escape without my mother, then they would not be successful. So basically, I would not be here. I wouldn't be born in Canada if it wasn't for this palm reader. The family took the advice. My mother, at the tender age of 25, packed up everything she, knew in a garbage bag and left and escaped on a boat to Vietnam. And that's one part of the story. The second part of the story is my mom recalls that the fortune teller told her that she would die at the age of 37. Now, the fascinating thing is I'm the eldest born daughter. So my mom had me when she was about 28. And for the first 10 years of my life, I can recognize as a child now, I didn't know it at the time, of course, but growing older, reflecting back, my mom was actually dealing with some pretty major, I think, depression and questions of mortality. And the peak came when I was in, grade 5, the 5th grade, age 10 years old, right around the time where the palm reader predicted that my mom would die. And as she was going through her own questions of, am I going to live or die? The most frustrating for me, a child, would be to hear, Mom, can we go to so-and-so's house next weekend? And all my enthusiasm, and she would turn back and just tell me, no. Let's see if we survive until next weekend, and then we will see if you can go. And this is really, I don't know if my brothers and sisters, I should ask them. My cousins remember this, but this certainly was something that I remembered because it was so frustrating. This in turn led to my own ruminations as a 10-year-old about, what happens if I die? What if my mom were to die? What if my dad were to die? What would happen? So I went on a whole dark night of the soul when I was in grade 5 and was rescued by my amazing teacher, Miss Maria King, one of the most amazing elementary school teachers that ever exists. Thank you, Maria. Handing me a copy of Dale Carnegie's How to Stop Worrying and How to Start Living, which I thought was hilarious. I thought, if a grown-up trusts me to read this grown-up book, then I must be okay, and I came out of it. The big thing to note about this was, I had kind of forgotten this story. This story had just become part of my family lore, my family story, and it didn't occur to me until I was sitting in a hand reading circle 2 years ago in the presence of Richard Unger, which was the first time that I interfaced with the modality of hand analysis that I'm so engaged in now. It was me sitting in that seat, waiting for the circle to begin, that I remembered this story. I remember and kind of had a big light bulb of how profoundly my life had been influenced by just, a conversation had by a palm reader in Vietnam. So it really kind of shook me at the moment. And I went home and talked to my mom after the fact and kind of asked her, I said, I had my hands read tonight, Mom. Do you remember that story that you told me about the palm reader? Let's talk about that, because I don't think we've talked about it for years. I'm 31 now. That death scare of my mom was 20 years ago. So we've touched bases here and there on that particular story, but not since. And what really struck me when we talked about it further is that, I'm not sure exactly what the palm reader told my mom. My mom very clearly interpreted it as, that you would die when you're 37 or 38. So when I asked her to flesh out some of the context, she said more, what the palm reader had actually told her was something a little bit more gentle, like, you'll be asked to live a life in integrity, to be a good person, and if you don't, then you will die at age 37 or 38. It was much, I think when I heard her repeat, was that it was a much more gentle prophecy that he had offered than what she actually remembered. But what it reminds me of is the tremendous, amazing honor, gift, and privilege it is to speak with somebody about, their life, and what a gift it is. So it's something that makes me think of two things. One, how magical life is, that I find myself, I've told you this story now, and my primary career for the last 10 years has been to be a nurse, and specifically to be a nurse who specializes in supporting people through death and dying. influenced by that conversation and how it flavored my mom's life and her perspective. And two, the perfectly circular, magical nature of the fact that now I am, 2 years into studying the scientific art of hand analysis and about to embark on my certification exam to become an advanced hand analyst. And the other thing is, just to really take a moment to really honor everyone who has shared their hands with me as a captive audience member, and to really thank you for that, no matter if it's just been like a little tiny thing that we've looked at or a bigger piece. So I want to thank you for sharing your hands with me. That has allowed me to now read 520 hands and counting, as I have my September appointment books open as well. Thank you. I hope that this video is a great introductory video, and I will be making more, both on the topic of death and dying and hand analysis. So thank you so much for listening, and goodbye for now.